Hello and welcome to the Business Octopus, where we talk about all things sales, marketing, and technology. I'm Avon Collis, CRM and Marketing Automation Specialist at Relevate and all-around good guy. Today, I am joined by Teale from Teale Consulting, here to talk about how SMEs can scale their marketing strategy. Welcome, Teale. How are you going?
I'm good, thank you. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries, and a little bit of a surprise that we are able to have this. At the moment, there is the Brisbane floods, and you've had a bit of damage recently to your house, which is unfortunate. But yeah. Everyone's okay.
Everyone's okay. Just a bit of damage in the backyard. We've had a bit of cleanup. We're all set for round 2, which is happening at the moment. So can't complain in the grand scheme of things. Hearts and thoughts are out to people who are still going through the cleanup and still have the water receding at the moment. So helps you keep perspective, you know. Absolutely.
But life and business must go on. So if you're listening and you hear some thunder, I've got kids next door because the schools are closed. Apologies. However, we are real, we are human, and we continue. So thank you very much for listening. However, we are going to get into our marketing strategy comments today. And one of the first questions I had for you was, we're dealing with SMEs. A lot of them are sort of, they get to a point or like they're not marketing professionals, they're not experts, or, they're all looking at the dollar budgets and the money that they've got to spend. And they're a little bit cautious about everything. It's like going to the casino and putting money on black and hoping you're going to make a fortune. What's some of the biggest challenges that most businesses have with scaling their marketing strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably the most common challenge I see is businesses, they get to a point, especially when they're young and they really are cautious of the budget. They really focus all of their attention and all of their spend on activities that will really drive conversions for them, and they can actually see the immediate benefit and see the sales which they've closed as a result. But what they do as a result of that is they tend to forget or not prioritize some of the more foundational, longer term brand marketing activities, which might not be as flashy on the surface or might not have that immediate conversion effect that you can measure, but are actually going to set you up for long-term success and long-term sustainability in terms of, really establishing good long-term relationships with your customers, making sure you have lower churn, higher conversion, and that you also get that customer retention in the long run as well. So getting the mix between your sort of more product and service driven marketing versus your brand marketing is really important. And it's the brand marketing piece is something that a lot of SMEs do tend to forget until they're trying to scale and they start encountering the issues because they don't have that piece of the puzzle in place.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, small businesses, they because they don't have the budgets, they're quite nervous about it. And you hear all these words like, I want to see ROI. I want to see, I'm not going to spend $1 unless I'm going to make $2, that sort of thing. And, people pour cash into Facebook and Google trying to make that pokies machine pay out. Excuse me. But I think like what you said there was that they don't sort of establish those foundations. They don't sort of let people know they exist. So it's very hard to trust them. So what, I guess, is brand marketing versus product marketing?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And I think it's an important thing because marketing is something that as consumers, we all encounter so much marketing in our day-to-day lives. I think that a lot of the time, when we go into running our own businesses, everyone suffers from a little bit of armchair expert syndrome in a way. And I say that in the nicest way, but as a result, people don't necessarily know some of the nuances or complexities to brand marketing versus product marketing, how to, split your budget between them, etc. But it is really important because they are two different, really important levers in your business. And you want to be able to make sure that you can take advantage of both. So brand marketing is really all about positioning your relationship with your customers. It's about making yourself the first and most obvious choice of purchase when they're ready to actually buy something. So brand marketing, it's a long-term game and it focuses on things like your brand identity, growing your brand awareness, and really understanding and influencing what your consumers' perceptions of you are. So it's really important if you want to establish, long-term repeat customers. It's really important if you're marketing, maybe higher ticket products or services that require a higher level of trust. And it's also the way that you go about building really solid brand advocates as well, who are going to go on and recommend you or refer you to their friends or family as well. So it's really important because it's all about the experience and the relationship and the feelings that your consumers associate with you. And that's really important because, like, we all kind of know that when it comes into marketing, how your consumers feel about your brand is a huge influence point when they're actually going to make their purchase decisions. That's the reason why people buy brand names over the generic product when it is exactly the same make and build. It's the feelings and the trust and the credibility that they associate with your brand. And that's what brand marketing is all focused about. Whereas product marketing and product and service marketing, we use that kind of interchangeably. It doesn't matter what you're selling, but think of that as being more tactical. That is the activities, your go-to-market strategy, your lead generation activities, which are really focused on driving revenue and conversions. So equally as important, you need both in your toolkit, absolutely. But product marketing is much more tactical. It's focused on, where to play and how to win. So you really want the good balance of both, because your product marketing is going to help you to achieve all of your short-term goals and make sure you actually have the revenue to continue growing your business. But your brand marketing is what's going to actually position you for your long-term success, and that's what's going to help you scale. And the analogy I always use is I equate it to kind of the foundation of your house. If you don't lay the foundation properly, if you do a shoddy job or you cut corners, eventually sooner or later you are going to have to come back and address it, because if you just keep putting all of your focus and all of your budget spend on the product marketing without having those foundations right, your marketing spend will eventually become less efficient. You're not going to get the same conversion results. You're not going to get the impact, essentially, and you're going to have to come back and address what it is. Think about it in the sense of, you can put all of the money into Facebook advertising to drive conversions and you can get some good results to it. But if you drive them back to your website and your website only converts, 1 in 100 customers versus you do some foundational work and it could be converting 1 in 50 customers, straight away your efficiency is going to go through the roof. So it's about getting those foundational building blocks in place and making sure that you don't neglect them either, that you keep a bit of a foot on the gas when it comes to your brand marketing activities, and understand, depending on where your business is and what your sort of short-term goals are, how do you get that right mix and right balance between the two different streams?
I think, what you've said there, and then going back to our first point, a lot of businesses in a digital world think that because they made the sale or they made the conversion online, that they think that was what got them, and so put more money there. And, like what you're talking about with brand, there are other areas, there are other avenues. And, it's quite easy to attribute the sale to those because, maybe they walked past the billboard, they read it in a magazine, they got something in the mail, physical, and then they got online, saw the ad and went, oh, you know what, I will. But the things that really sunk in before that kind of fed into their self-conscious was those little branding moments. Maybe it was nice touch that they saw them over multiple channels. And what you're talking about in terms of having good foundations, we believe the same for like the digital architecture. And so, if you stuff it at the start, you lock yourself in and you ruin which then makes it not scalable.
It's definitely one of those things. I think digital is a wonderful thing because it does give you so much measurability. But as a result, I think a lot of people then think, okay, if there's not a measurable conversion off the back of it, then it hasn't been successful. Whereas you need to actually understand what is the metric for success, and not every channel is going to have the same definition of success. If you think of it, marketing has a pipeline the same way that you have a sales pipeline where you might prospect and qualify and nurture them along in a sales. Marketing has the same pipeline as well. Customers go through a journey of awareness where they actually first come across your product or service and learn about who you are and what you're about. Then they go through consideration where they do their research and understand, does this product or service actually meet their needs? And then they move into the conversion phase. So if you focus all of your attention and activities purely on conversion, but you don't feed the top of that funnel, eventually you're going to run out, or you are going to start encountering issues. So it is really important to get all of those pieces in place. And it is a balancing act, obviously, especially when businesses are younger and they're startups or they're, in their first few years and they're trying to establish. They are trying to be smart about where they spend their budget. And you do need to focus on those conversion-driven activities in order to be able to grow. But it is about balancing that with exactly what you said. It's about sometimes the taking the time to actually focus on your foundational infrastructure, you're going to end up saving yourself not just money, but also time and pain later down the track, because you are just going to have to come back and fix it anyway.
You know, I just, as you're saying that, I'm thinking like, and whilst not every business should necessarily go and invest in a TV ad, but like, how many TV ads have you seen that say, you know, buy now and get a free set of steak knives, or, you know, on $99 only, or something like that? Like, yes, those ads are out there and they're available, but, and this might be a bit of a graphic of an explanation, but do you remember like the Tui's beer ad where this guy's asleep on the couch and his tongue leaves his body and goes on a little adventure, slithering around to try and find this beer because it really loves that beer? And that is a branding exercise. At no point in that video do they say, you can get one for get a carton for $49 and, you know, we'll ship it to you or whatever. Like, there is no call to action in that ad whatsoever.
But you remember it is the important thing, and you've created an association with that brand that is going to stick with you now whenever you think of them or encounter them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so that I think, you know, like when you're talking about that foundational stuff, you know, one thing a lot of times people go, I want organic marketing, but then they just go to Facebook and they put a post and it dies after like 10 days. But, you know, what if they forget the entire chain, and there's a lot more work involved, which could be that, you know, like this, we record out some content, then we snippetize it, we put it out there. We also put it onto a web page with a transcript and maybe the audio there as well. And then that also gets turned into social posts, which is all these like a web feeding down into someone going to your website, understanding you're a brand, trusting your opinion and understanding what you're about, and then getting to the decision, yeah, I'm going to buy. So that's crazy. And obviously that takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time and money. So how does a business set a budget for this sort of thing?
Yeah, it's probably the biggest question that everyone that I come across kind of has when it comes to their marketing. What's the right kind of rule of thumb? My worst pet hate is when someone, you'd probably come across this too. I think the worst pet hate of anybody in marketing or any associated industry is when someone says, well, what budget do I need to achieve this? You know, and it really is, how long is a piece of string? You know? Yeah. There are some good kind of rules of thumb that can guide you along though. So, and keep in mind, everything I share here, these are going to be broad generalizations. I'm not saying everybody should go and rework their entire marketing budgets based off of this, but
this information is for general advice only. Please advise from
but I think a lot of people get really caught up on that idea of your marketing should be 5% of your sales revenue. It's become kind of the most predominant, well-known rule of thumb with budgets, and it's okay, but it's so broad that it's almost useless to most people in most businesses.
Well, I mean, there's like maintenance budgets and then there's growth budgets. So I've heard 10%, I've heard even 20%. Like, it just depends on so many factors.
It really does. And so some of the things that you really need to ask yourself if you're going to set a budget up is really like, where are you currently as a business? Are you a startup? Are you sort of young and growing? Are you a well-established operation? Are you looking to actually increase your market share, or are you looking to just maintain your current level of sales that you've already got? Like 5% as a rule of thumb is generally okay if you want to maintain the sales that you've got, but generally speaking, if you want to actually grow, you're looking at 10% or more if you're looking to grow. But it also depends. Are you a B2B driven business or are you a B2C driven business? Consumer marketing always, to maintain a consumer marketing business, you're probably looking at 8 to 10% as a rule of thumb versus 5%. You also want to be looking at factors like, are you a very transactional business, like something like clothes or fast food or like kind of low-end consumer goods, or are you a higher end product service as well? So for example, are you something that requires a higher level of kind of consideration and education and awareness for the consumer to purchase? So if you're in an industry like finance or aged care, for example, you're going to need to be investing more of your money into activities like brand awareness and general education of your consumer than somebody who's just pushing out an FMCG good that kind of sells itself and speaks for itself is going to be. So you need to kind of look at all of those factors, and then you can kind of get a more accurate percentage of your total sales revenue that you want to be investing. Obviously, you don't want to overinvest. Like, I don't recommend anybody spend themselves into a hole that they can't get out of, obviously. But if you're looking to actually grow, working out realistically how much you can spend, and then working out, okay, within this, what are the channels and what are the levers that we want to pull that are going to get us the best gains. But make sure that you do have a split between your brand marketing and your product driven activities. And you can generally work that out. If you are a product or service driven business, you can generally work that out either by your campaigns or by the revenue that each particular product or service actually drives. You can work out a realistic percentage that you want to be assigning to each product driven campaign, and then a percentage on top of that, which you want to be driving towards your overall brand marketing activities based off of what your long-term growth goals are. But the other key part here to really also consider is, are you a sales-driven business or are you a marketing-driven business as well? Because this will really determine the channels that you actually invest and spend that money in. A lot of businesses don't even necessarily know if they're a sales or marketing-driven company. They think that they're both. And yes, most businesses are going to have both, but it is very rare that you come across a business that is driven 50-50 by their sales and marketing departments. Generally speaking, they are always predominantly driven more by one than the other. And when we say sales and marketing, I'm talking a sales-driven company is something that generally requires a salesperson to actually help get that conversion across the line. So think of a car purchase, for example. You know, you can do a lot of brand advertising to sort of draw people into the car yard, but there's going to be a salesperson to actually help that consumer navigate the purchase and actually get the conversion across the line. Versus if you think of something that is more marketing driven, you might think of something that doesn't necessarily, you might have a sales assistant or a salesperson there that can support a customer if they require it. But generally speaking, a customer can go through the whole process without the intervention of a salesperson. So think of something, or retail, or think of, you know, a clothing purchase where you can do your marketing to attract the people, get them into the store, and they can call upon a sales assistant if they need, but they can also go through the entire process themselves without assistance if they need. That's really important to understand where your focus on your marketing budget should go, because if you're a sales-driven company, then your activities are more going to be focused on brand awareness and actually bringing them in to the salesperson, but letting the sales team actually focus on the conversion process. Whereas if you're more of a marketing-driven company, you're going to want to spread your marketing budget over a range and make sure that you actually have touch points across awareness, consideration, and conversion driving tactics.
Yeah. I think, as you were saying that, I don't know if it's Red Bull or something, they put like 30 or 40% into their marketing budget. It's absolutely huge. But that's massively branding, because it's all about like X Games and jumping out of a parachute above the atmosphere, or a hot air balloon out of the atmosphere. And basically, you know, like, they've put a lot of money into branding, and they're like one of the most successful energy drinks in the world. And the flip side of that, I guess, is in terms of smaller businesses working out their budgets. I know the tax office put out like industry benchmarking for, you know, breakdown of expenditure for things like marketing, rent, wages. So you can go and find a relative industry that's close to or the same as yours, pull out that and use that as a guide. And you can either go below that as a maintenance kind of a marketing, or you could go above that as a like growth marketing. And in my mind, you would then break that down into percentages of, you know, 10% goes towards copy and you know, content creation, 10% towards X, Y, Z, ads, etc. So, you know, it's, and I think a lot of times people go, I spend $20, I get 3 leads or something like that. And that's not how it works.
No,
There's
not.
peaks and troughs, there's ups and downs, there's, you know, like, imagine anything in relation to the, you know, financial markets or global events or things like that, they affect spend, conversions, you know, half the power outs across Brisbane. So it's there's a lot of factors to it.
But interestingly, there's been a lot of market research conducted on how brands advertised throughout 2020 when COVID first hit and the lockdowns were all in place. And the brands did 2 things. Brands either pulled back all of their marketing spend because they weren't driving purchases, or brands doubled down and they maintained it and they kept connecting and engaging with customers. And a lot of that activity was purely brand marketing activity because people weren't in a position or weren't able to actually go through and make purchases. And what we actually saw as a result of that was the businesses that continued to invest in brand marketing activities, they continued to engage with their consumers, and it wasn't purchase or conversion focused. It was purely to engage, to distract, to educate, to connect with people. And they came out the other side when the country sort of started to come out of lockdown and people could get back out to shops and make purchases. Those businesses then skyrocketed because they had the highest top of mind brand awareness and brand consideration, which then had the impact on their ROI. So it is a long game, but it definitely has that impact when it comes to nurturing that relationship with your consumers so that you get sustainable, scalable growth.
And that human connection. I mean, people think about, if you're sick and you go to hospital, the people you remember are the people that came to see you and, maybe sent you flowers or something that showed they cared. So that humanization, I don't think it's that ultimately that complex. If you're thinking, how do I do my marketing? Just be a really good person. And imagine if you were a business, think about how you could also be a really good person.
It really comes down to when we get people to kind of look at what their brand identity is. I think a lot of people think brand identity, oh, this is my logo or my brand colors, here's my font, that I put on everything. But it also really comes down to your brand persona and your brand communication strategy. The actual communication and the messaging of this is who we are as a business, this is what we stand for, is a huge piece that often gets missed out when businesses are doing those foundational building blocks and when they're starting up, when they're getting their brand identity in place. It's often a huge missing piece. And if you do that, if you don't have that foundation in place, what that means is later down the track, your communication and your messaging and all of your marketing campaigns and activities is going to end up really fragmented, and it's not going to drive the best results for you because people aren't going to be clear about who you are as a brand, what it is that you stand for and what you represent. And exactly what you said, what it all kind of comes down to is, what are you trying to, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What are you trying to help with? And why should people trust you? What is it that you're trying to actually do and achieve in the world, and why should people trust you? That's what it kind of comes down to. And if you can kind of explain that and encapsulate that in a really clear, easy to understand way, that is a huge foundation in your brand identity and all of your brand marketing activities.
Absolutely. So in terms of some takeaways the business can go with, what's a couple of things that they can do right now that would help them get in the right direction?
Yeah, look, one thing that I always recommend everybody do, even if you're a more well-established company and you have this in place, you need to maintain your brand identity because it is the core building block to all of your brand marketing and product marketing activities. So if you haven't done this or if you haven't revisited it in a while, I always recommend that everybody go back and actually make sure that you have a communications master, a communications one-pager where you actually go back and write out what is your brand statement, what is your elevator pitch, and what are the top 3 core key messages that people need to know about you and your brand to understand exactly what we said, who you are, what the problem you're trying to solve, and why people should trust you. If you can go back and if you can articulate that in a really clear, easy way, that then becomes a foundational building block. So much like you have a style guide that you would share with people to understand your look and feel, make sure that people understand who your business persona actually is. Make sure that they understand your tone of voice. Make sure that they understand what it is that you do, why you do it. Make it relatable for them, and then make that a foundational piece that every new employee coming into the business can read this and they understand who you are at a fundamental level and what you're trying to achieve. Make sure that you give that to all of your marketing agencies that you work with. Make sure that you give that's the foundation for every piece of copy that you then write for any brand or product activity that you do throughout the rest of your business. It's the core foundational building block that is going to go and make the rest of your marketing activities so much easier if you have that document in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Sage words for your listening. That's very, very good advice. I know it sounds like it should be in your head, and maybe you just haven't got to that yet, but you can't empower others if they don't have a clear vision. They're not in your head, so you need to get it out and put it in the middle, and then you can talk about it, discuss it, to handle any problems that might exist as a result. But otherwise, fantastic content. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. A lot of fun.
No worries at all. So if you're listening and you want to learn more about how to build your strategy and allow it to scale and have those good foundations, then you can get in touch with Teale at tealedallas.com. Her LinkedIn profile and the website will also be in the episode comments, so keep an eye out for that. Also, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. If you have any questions or you'd like to be on the show, you can check out relevate.com.au and fill out a contact form. Otherwise, thank you for listening. Take care.